Good morning, church family. Sue Buckwalter here. Time for our children's lesson. So if you're viewing online at home, gather up your family members and have a seat. And if you're here in church, dial in and see what the Lord has to speak to you about today through our lesson. Well, today's lesson is going to be on following instructions, or directions, if you will. So most of us, if we were being really honest, we don't really like to follow directions. I myself struggle with following directions because sometimes I just like to figure it out as I'm working with a project or whatever. Sometimes I just like to kind of wing it. But sometimes in life, we can't skip specific instructions. Well, you see in front of me today, boys and girls, I've got like this walker, and I've got some medicine, and I've got this weird tubey breathing thing. Well, I brought these things in today to show you a lesson on following instructions. So, as most of you know, Pastor Mark just had a major knee replacement surgery, and when he came home, or after he had the surgery, the nurses were giving me a lot of instructions on how to take care of Pastor Mark so that he would heal properly. They gave me this long list of directions to follow, and we had so many specific directions we had to follow. And boys and girls, remember, Miss Sue is not a nurse. I am just a teacher, so doing nursey kind of things is a little tough for me. So I had to follow directions very specifically. I had to give him his medicines at a certain time. We had to do this breathing thing, like every couple hours he had to blow into this tube to help his lungs to keep staying clear. We had to use these big ice packs about every half an hour or so. He also had to wear these tights on his legs to keep the compression on them. So girls, you're probably laughing, Pastor Mark had to wear tights. Ooh, that's kind of funny. And boys, you're probably thinking, men don't wear tights. Well, if you have surgery, you have to wear tights. Okay, so we had to follow all these instructions. There was a lot of instructions to keep straight. He even had to use this walker to walk around the house because he was allowed to put weight on his knee, but he had to be really careful because his knee was really unsteady. Well, if we didn't follow those directions, Pastor Mark could have had a lot of pain and suffering. He could have gotten an infection. He could have gotten sick from his surgery. But we did follow his instructions, and he's healing really great. He's doing a good job, and he's really getting strong again back in that knee of his. Well, this reminds me of a story about somebody who had to follow God's instructions, and it reminds me of the story of Samson. Now, Samson, the story of his life was found in Judges chapter 13. That's the beginning of it, and it goes on for a couple of chapters in Judges. Well, Samson's parents could not have a child, and God sent an angel to Samson's parents and told his parents that they were going to have a child, and he was going to be set apart from birth, and he was not to have his head shaved. Any razor, nothing was to touch his head. He was to have long hair because he was going to be a Nazirite. Well, his mom also was given instructions on how to take care of herself, not to drink fermented drinks or to eat anything that was unclean while she was pregnant with him, because this was all a part of what God's plan was, because Samson was going to bring about the deliverance of the Israelites from the Philistines. And you remember back, with David and Goliath, they had trouble with the Philistines. The Israelites are having trouble with the Philistines now in this story. And so God brings Samson into the picture to deliver the Israelites once again from the Philistines. Well, Samson grew up, and they didn't cut his hair, and he followed God's instructions that they gave for his life to live. Well, Samson got himself into a lot of tangles with the Philistines, and the Philistines didn't like him at all, and they wanted to capture him so that he could stop causing them trouble. Well, a long story short, Samson did get captured by the Philistines, and they found out if they cut his hair, he would have the strength of a normal man and not the superhuman strength like he had before. Well, they did end up cutting his hair, and they blinded him, and he ended up becoming as strong as a normal man. But eventually, God did allow Samson to have his revenge on the Philistines at the end of his life. But God asked Samson to follow him in obedience. Now, Samson's strength did not come from him having long hair. His strength came from his obedience to following God. And that's what I wanted to finish off our lesson with today, boys and girls, that our strength in our life comes from obeying God and His Word. His word gives us instructions on how to live. The Bible is full of all kinds of answers to questions we may have. And if we read our Bible and we follow what God tells us, doesn't mean that we're going to have no problems in our life, but it will help us when we do have trouble that we have this instruction book. It says in Proverbs 3, chapter 3, verses 1 and 2, it says, "My son, do not forget my teaching, but keep my commands in your heart, for they will prolong your life many years and will bring you prosperity." So boys and girls, not following God's directions can have a very negative effect on our life, and it can cause us to go down bad paths and have some serious consequences for the rest of our lives when we don't follow God's instructions and His word. Lord, so this week, I would like to ask you kids to remember this. Follow what God's asking you to do. Follow His directions and be obedient to what His word has to say to you for your lives. All right, all for now, kids. Bye.